Hello, class, and welcome to Theater Appreciation. This is a lecture demo slideshow on Chapter 1 and Chapter 2, and we start our class in Theater Appreciation by just kind of saying what is art, because theater is part of art in general. So what is art? And if you wanted to think about that and try to define it, it could be a lot of things, but basically art is something that just looks at life and then tries to represent it in some way. As you can see, it could be represented pictorially, it could be represented in dance, it could be represented in music, but every song you hear, for instance, is a type of art and is telling you something about life. And theater is just a subset of art. But the great thing about theater is that it encompasses all the elements of art. Theater encompasses sound, it encompasses image, it encompasses movement, it encompasses story, it encompasses people, it encompasses sculpture, and every amalgam of every kind of element of art goes into theater, which is one of the reasons I love it. So in my on-ground class, I asked the class to define what is theater. And if you think about it, what is theater? Well, you could say it's some actors, or it's a show, but it's some actors telling a story. But basically, I think if you define it, it's living story. Because yes, there is some kind of a story in theater, but there's also a story in a painting. There's a story in a song. Definitely songs tell stories, but it's living. It's living and it's breathing and it's real and it's people. So it encompasses all the emotions that we have in our life: joy, sadness, humor, tragedy, pathos, everything, irony. Everything is part of what theater is, but it's all story that comes to life. And writing too, books, novels. A lot of theater came from stories and novels, but now it's coming from movie scripts. So, and again, movies and TV are just an extension of theater. It's an electronic extension of theater. So, in the text, they break it down, and this is maybe a little arbitrary, but basically, for you to have theater, you have to have somebody viewing something, you have to have an audience, and you've got someone up on stage as a performer. And some people would argue that's all you need for theater. You just need an audience and you need an actor, and boom, you've got theater. However, usually, and probably to the benefit, there's more to it. There's some kind of a script. Someone has composed some words, and really in about 98% of everything you see, it has been scripted. It has been written. Sometimes it's by a solo writer, sometimes it's by a group of writers. And then usually someone has to oversee that production, and that would be the director. And then, and this is also important, it takes place somewhere, not just a theater. It could take place on a sound stage. It could take place on a city street. I remember seeing a wonderful production that took place in a park. People moved around in the space, and it really makes a difference. And when we get to that, I think we get to chapter 8, I believe, we talk about how the space makes a difference in what you see. And also there's the design elements. And the design elements can also encompass anything visual. I think it also encompasses sound, because that's a sound design. And then that, by corollary, that's music too. So music and sound and the sets and the costumes, all of that is part of design. So that's a huge category in itself, kind of all lumped together. So the text talks about how we have these 6 basic elements: audience, performer, script, director, theater space, and design. to make our package of theater. And again, you can spread this out into the world of media, in the world of film and television and electronic media. Now everybody's on their computer, in the virtual world, all really has this kind of these kind of elements. Now the space, if it's online, is basically your computer screen. So there's limitations there. So that's why a lot of people prefer going to a real event. You know, it's nice to see something on streaming, but wouldn't you rather go to a really live concert too? It's a whole different experience. Okay, the other thing is that theater and the elements of theater are everywhere. They're everywhere. These elements transcend just a performance. You could look at all of the different, anytime you have an event that people view, you have an element of theater. This looks like a parade. So you've got an audience, you've got the people who are doing the, you know, carrying the decorative figures, and there's certainly art involved, and there's probably, you know, drumming and music and sound. But any event, whether it's a, you know, like an ice show or a rodeo, those are all corollary to theater. Circuses, parades, you know, and rock concerts and dance concerts and ballets, and then even orchestra and musical concerts. You have lots of those elements. You have a stage, you have people watching it, you have performers, you have someone directing it, you have somebody coordinate it, you have design elements, people are doing lights. Even in religion, and we'll look at how in early theater that religion and theater were very closely aligned, and actually elements of theater came out of the religious experience. So if you go to a religious service, you have the congregation, you have your religious leader, you have the elements, the robes and things that people wear in those ceremonies. You have music, you have viewing. So there's elements of that. Even in things like war, there's the term a theater of war. It has elements because you've got the army, you've got the generals moving the troops around, you've got the soldiers in uniform, you've got the battle plans, you know. So there's elements of theater in every type of communal viewing event that we have. And we are a very communal people. As you can see now, right now, we're in this middle of a pandemic. So you see how different it is now when you cannot access other people as readily as before. So it makes a difference. Theater itself, theater and movies and television are multicultural because every group finds some expression of theater and expresses it in a different way. I just was watching Sense8, which I hadn't seen. It's been out for a few years. And I was struck by how global it is. If anyone's seen it, they use actors. The whole premise of Sense8 is that these people are connected somehow, you know, symbiotically. They're come through just their, you know, in this kind of very spiritual and non-physical way. But there's people in China or Japan and India and America and Iceland and Namibia and Namibia and in Africa, all over the world, in Germany. These people are all connected. So it was really a wonderful international show because it really shows how people are tied together. But every group, including, you know, grade school kids, college, Broadway, you know, any kind of a minority group or a special interest group has a brand of theater that they're expressing. So theater comes in all different shapes and sizes and varieties, and it's all different and it's all wonderful. And that's one of the great things about theater. So you might ask yourself, how fundamental is theater? Well, you know, basically, usually your parents say, "Oh, you know, don't be a performer. Don't go to life on the wicked stage." There's a song about that, "Life upon the wicked stage," and you know, obviously, you have to eat and drink and sleep and be healthy. So again, you can see how fundamental, medicine is, and farmers that raise food. We have to eat, we have to be healthy, we have to have shelter over our heads. So those are elemental and very fundamental. But I always ask my classes, well, theater may not be in that category, but theater lives in the world of your imagination. And the world of your imagination is the world that you get when you listen to a song that makes you cry or makes you laugh, or you read a good book, or you watch a good movie, or you see a funny show. That's where theater lives. Theater lives in that world of imagination. And I say to my classes, well, maybe that's not fundamental, but at the same time, what happens when you take it away? What happens when you live in a world where you cannot go into your imagination? You cannot go into the world. You cannot view and experience and live vicariously other people's emotions and share with that. What would your day be like if you couldn't listen to the radio, if you couldn't get on the internet, if you just had your daily life where you got up and you plowed the fields and you ate and you cooked, and then you walked around, and then you maybe talked to your family, and then you went to bed? What would that be like, with no time to experience the world of your thoughts and your imaginations? Because that's where theater comes from, and that's where all art comes from, and all literature. It comes from that. And so I would argue that it may not be necessary for complete survival, but survival without having that experience is not much of a survival. So I would argue that the human being needs that life of their imagination. They need to experience that to be a complete human being, to be able to share with others and experience other people, and in that to have a fuller, more richer life. So I would argue that theater is very fundamental, just like all the arts are fundamental to our fulfilling, enriching experience. So with that thought, let's move on to the next slide. We are now in chapter 2. So yes, now we're looking at the various elements of theater, and yes, theater needs an audience. It becomes a tautology because the audience mirrors the play. The audience and the play mirrors the audience. A lot of times when you do a film, they do test audiences to see if the film is going to be good. It's the same thing. Does this story have an audience? And if they can't find an audience for it, they tailor it and try to tailor it for an audience. Because, like someone once told me, if there ain't no bodies in the seat, then it ain't theater. There've got to be people to view it. So the audience and the feedback, the reception is vitally important in the world of theater. Theater needs an audience needs the theater. And the people select shows that they want to go see. They see a show they like, and because it reflects things that they like. And so you've got this kind of mirror going on. So the audience is very, very important. And the audience also participates. Now, maybe not in this crazy, I've got a picture here, this crazy slide of Rocky Horror Show, where it became a big cult hit and people dressed up as the characters and went to these live movie shows and threw popcorn at the screen and did crazy things. That's very active audience participation. And in the very olden days, like even in the Renaissance times, if people didn't like a show, they'd throw tomatoes and stuff at you. So that was pretty active too. But also the audience participates through their imagination by a willing suspension of disbelief. Let's look at, for instance, let's go back to a song. How about something like Adele's song, about where she goes up to the door, and of her lost boyfriend, and I can't think of the name of that song right away, but it's very, very famous. Um, I wish nothing but the best. I wish nothing but the best for you. Uh, don't forget me, I say. How many people have listened to that song and thought about a long lost love? And again, that's Adele singing. But when you listen to that song, you're not thinking about Adele, reconnecting with her boyfriend. You're thinking about maybe a time that you had a long lost love, and it takes you into the world of your imagination. So that's what your willing suspension of disbelief is. You willingly have an implicit contract that I know this song is not about me, or I know this show is not about me, or I know this story is not about me, but I'm willing to set that aside and enter into this world. I'm going to suspend my disbelief that this is just a story. This may or may not be true, but I'm going to pretend that it is, and I'm going to enter into that world. So anytime you go see a movie, you read a book, you enter into that world, and you watch a play. You enter that world. It's an implicit contract. You don't sign a contract when you go to the show and say, I'm going to believe everything that goes on here. It's just implicit. You automatically go into it because that's what your imagination does. Your imagination wants to get out of your body and experience that. But also we have the aesthetic distance, which means that there's always some kind of separation between the audience and the performing event. So it made people all throughout ages tried to break that wall. They wanted to get close. They want to really get in people's face. Sometimes, a lot of times you'll see a show and you've got it's way on a stage far away and you're a long distance away. So your aesthetic distance is far away. But a lot of theater artists really always struggle against that and try to find ways to break that wall. They'll literally do shows where people are like the audience members sitting next to you as part of the show. They'll have people in the audience, and you may have seen a show like that too, where somebody jumps out of the audience. So that means your aesthetic distance has changed. However, you still have a separation. You still know that it's a play, or it's a piece of fiction, and you're not part of it, and you're amused by it. But that distance sometimes shrinks and contracts, and then it expands. So that's another term that we have. These two terms about willing suspension of disbelief and aesthetic distance. Here's an example. Here's a video of it was an opening of a museum in I think the Netherlands, and what they did was they went to a mall, just like you would go to one of your big malls, and they did this kind of living performance. Basically, it was a promotional for the opening of this museum, but they went in terms of aesthetic distance. They were in and among the shoppers of this mall. So I'm going to play you this clip. It's really fun. Let me see if I can pull it up here. Oops, not there. Let's see where it's at. Here we go. All right, that was pretty cool, wasn't it? Okay, let me see if I can find my PowerPoint. Ah, there we go. Okay, so, whoops, uh-oh. Let me go back. Doesn't stop from there. All right, okay, enough of that. Okay, so that was a clip showing you how people try to break that aesthetic distance. All right, let's keep moving on. So then it becomes a target audience. Every show, again, is targeted for a particular audience, and a playwright or a writer writes for, a comedy. Think of the shows you watch. There's the kind of show you may watch with your parents, and maybe there's the kind of show you watch with your friends, and maybe there's the kind of show you watch with little kids. So those are all shows that are targeted for a specific audience. So, and there's something for everybody. Again, there's something for every particular group. There's always theater and information. In our country, obviously, nowadays, we target lots of different specific groups. We become balkanized is the term, rather than more cohesive. So that's going to be a problem, but that's also what the target audience is about. So you might ask yourself, who is my group? What do I watch? And what does this say about who I am and what my tastes are? Do you like to watch a lot of football? Do you like to watch a lot of soap operas? Do you like to watch a lot of corny comedies? Do you watch a lot of stuff on the internet that's just like funny, silly stuff? Do you watch a lot of political stuff? Everybody has a different target and different taste. And so every show has some kind of a target demographic. So when you're evaluating a show, you're going to be evaluating, I think, 5 different productions of varying length, size, shape, time period. Theater criticism is part of being an audience, because every time you see something, you evaluate it. Now, I remember a very important professional director once said to me, he says, an audience, if you ask them what they thought of it, they're not critics and everything. They can't, they say, well, I don't know, but you can always ask them, did you like it or not? And so if you start with that, did you like it or not? Anybody can answer that. The question is, how much detail can you go into it? So you evaluate it, and there's levels of evaluation. Generally, the kind of reviews you see in a newspaper are just that, or they're done by reviewers, as opposed to a critic. And a critic is basically a reviewer who's had a lot more education, a lot more background, and their kind of their criticisms would show up probably in a literary journal rather than a newspaper. So generally, you're going to be at the level of just reviewing something, and the whole point of a review is to, if you didn't like it, tell us why. Tell us why. Maybe the actor was, kept blowing their lines, or the actor seemed stilted or something, or maybe the sets didn't really jive with the period, or maybe it was like a comedy and all the sets were really darkly colored, or maybe you couldn't hear people, or, there's lots of things. Specifically, why did you not, or why did you like something? Somebody was really convincing, somebody really understood their character, or the show really touched me. All those things are part of your evaluation and your response. So you will look at, I think, 5 different pieces over the course of this semester, maybe even a little more, some little ones. I think you're going to see a little one in this module. And you'll write your thoughts. So what I'm looking for is detail. Tell me why, but more than just like, I didn't like it, tell me why you didn't, and be more descriptive about it and more fuller in your discussion. So you look at who's attempting what is the playwright trying to do, and does the director have anything to do with that? And we'll look specifically at the playwright and the director later on. And is it all good? The sets, lights, costume. So we'll go into more detail over all these areas as we proceed through this semester. So these are different elements that you will look at. Okay. So this is going to be your assignment, class. there's a short play that's in your discussion board. Uh, I think it's called Family 2.0. And you might like the play, you may not. Uh, and that's okay. It may not appeal to everybody, but what I want you to do is say, well, who would like this play? Maybe I like it, maybe somebody else does. So, who would like it and why? And again, was the acting any good? Were the sets any good? So even at this level of the beginning of the semester, you still should be able to offer some kind of responses for this. And maybe as we go through the semester, you'll have more detailing. So, and again, you'll post your discussion in the discussion board, and other people will have a chance to look at it and make a comment, hopefully a positive comment. You want to try to be positive in this class. And so support everybody, because we're all learning and we're all going from there. So I believe that's all that I've got for chapter 1 and chapter 2. This is kind of an overview. So hopefully this has helped you as you read through the text and take the quiz and watch the play. So I'll talk to you later. All righty. Take care. Let me see. And I'm going to